want to get purposely unplugged in 2024, visit Lori. This is my friend Lori, and we're going to talk about today. This is a tough one because you brought this up a few months ago and we started talking about it. And I feel like we're pulling on a thread here. I'm not even going to say it because I feel like once we pull this, it's like, see you in 2025, because this is going to be a topic that we get into. But origin of family. And I think that's family of origin. I think that's critical because when you start looking at what you do, and first tell everybody what you do, let's refresh, and then let's get into it.
Mm-hmm. Dave, I'm lucky enough to be a therapist. It just means that in difficult moments, people can come, we talk things through, look at different alternatives, and just begin healing conversations.
So this topic, why is it rooted so deeply? And off air, I mentioned to you, like, boy, when you go down this road, there could be like 20 different things, couldn't there? And you had a really good explanation. So first, explain what it is, and then I want to hear your explanation again because that made so much sense to me.
Mm-hmm. So when we talk about family of origin, we're talking about those who cared for us as children. So that might be parents, it might be siblings, it might be aunts, grandparents. And in today's society, this might be a blended set of individuals who cared for you as a child. But really, when we look at that, then we need to see that sometimes the decisions we're making as adults are influenced by those social systems that we were raised in.
So that impact right there alone is this child, and you're looking up to this person, identifying, but maybe the issues they're coping with somehow filter to you. Like, I don't want to say they filter to you, but you see them. You're, oh, is that the way I'm supposed to act? Oh, is that how I'm supposed to behave in this situation? Is that kind of where we're going with this?
Mm-hmm. So often the patterns we were raised with are kind of behind the choices we make, the beliefs we have, the emotions we carry. So sometimes patterns in family can diffuse stress. Sometimes patterns in family can accentuate stress. And then that becomes kind of how we're making some decisions as adults or not. I've seen this go both ways, Dave. Sometimes I'll sit down with a client and they'll say, because I was raised this way, there's no way I'm doing that. Other people kind of have conversations where they say, because I was raised, this is really important to me. So it can go either way on this pendulum.
When you're looking at that conversation and that, when they say that to you, though, isn't it their best interest to be more open-minded? Because they're not willing, like if they want to get to the root of this problem, you might have to look at that a little deeper, even though you don't want to, and that's maybe something that's a precedent in your family, but it could be what's holding you back, correct?
Absolutely. And that's what I mean. As they're saying, I'll never do that, because then we dig deeper. We look deeper. We ask more questions. And often then clients are making connections of, oh, I had no idea that because I was expected to keep my room perfectly clean as a child, that as an adult now, I have no tolerance with the person I live with because they're not keeping our spaces clean in the home. It can even be something like that, Dave.
And it can go so much deeper. Like that's a surface one, really. Is it the same too? Let's say you're a young boy without a father. You're raised without a father, just by a mother. So that's kind of an empty vessel because you don't know, right? You're, as a child without a dad, you don't know how to react. You've never had that. So when they have kids of their own, they might not know how to be a dad, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's definitely a valid conversation. And sometimes what we talk about too are just how do you build your social networks so that you have people to mentor and that people who can mentor you. So in all those situations, part of this counseling relationship is really not only talking about how did we get here, but how can we build supports around what you need right now in the challenges that you're facing.
If you grew up in an era 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 30 years ago, and your family wasn't, I mean, back then things were just pushed away or brushed under, or you just didn't have the financial means to get therapy, which was pretty rare back in those days, I would think, in our area. So you're seeing this crest now, aren't you? All these people that are coming through that have sort of went, wait a minute, that my life shouldn't be like this. Does that play into it too, the social economical part of it?
It can. And honestly, Dave, I mean, I meet with people who are 60, 70, and 80 and say, I've never talked about this with anyone. So I also meet with people who are 10, 12, and 14 and say, I can't talk about this to anyone. So really, it's these sheltered conversations and a safe place to do it. And there's a whole nother piece here, too. It's intergenerational trauma, meaning if someone in our family experienced distress or trauma, that their emotional and behavioral responses can kind of ripple through the family. So that's even different. I mean, that could be abuse, discrimination, national disasters, racism. I mean, lots of us still have family members who lived through the war, and we still see the effects of that.
It's an interesting conversation because I wrote a piece last month, and one of the things, it was 2 months ago, one of the things I talked about in that was my grandfather, and I think you and I had this conversation last time.
Mhm.
And I didn't always agree with his opinions.
Mhm.
I had a ton of respect for him because what he'd accomplished in his life and what he came from was amazing.
Mhm.
But I didn't always, agree with him. But we still always had these wonderful conversations.
Mhm.
And I think at some point when I don't know what age it is. I suppose everybody's different from 12 to 20. When you sort of start to see things in your own light, that's when you sort of got to be able to adapt and adjust to what maybe you were brought up in,
Mhm.
but that might not be your values today, right? And that can
Mhm.
be hard on a person. Like I can't even imagine trying to make those, you know, I was pretty open minded, but I mean, trying to have that conversation with
Mhm.
yourself, even to say, I
Mhm.
don't feel like this is right in any form of trauma.
Mhm. Absolutely. And it comes from a value structure as well, right? So the values of how we're making decisions, values of how families are making decisions. And I mean, you started this part of the conversation by saying sometimes our families just swept things under the rug. So
Yeah.
you could be the first person in your family to start talking about whatever this trauma was. And then there's multiple kind of ripples because of that. Indeed.
And we didn't even touch base because you can talk about addictions,
Yeah.
right? Like there's so many secondary, they can be, obviously they can be out front first phase problems, but I mean, that effect on a family and then
Mhm.
the next generation, I mean,
Mhm.
that's a little bit of genetics, obviously, in there somewhere and the addiction piece, but I mean, that ripple effect can just go on and that cycle can continue and continue and continue. So when someone steps forward to break a cycle, that's amazing to me. That's just
Yeah.
like, wow, that's
That
somebody
is.
stepping up to the plate.
Yeah, that is amazing. And that's the work that I'm lucky enough to do. So it's definitely a good space to be. And the place I land, Dave, is if someone's living with a challenge right now, or decisions right now, or difficulties right now, and they think they might be rooted in family of origin or rooted closely to intergenerational trauma, then just have that conversation. As therapists, we can begin those conversations and really determine what do we work on, do we work on things, and what direction do we take so that the client achieves the success they want.
What advice would you give to a young family starting out so that they don't travel down some of these roads? Like, what would you
Mhm.
say?
So
You've got
you
a
mean
couple
young?
kids
Yeah.
and you're starting out, you've got your first house and all this, but what advice would you give them to keep that conversation going?
Hmm. Well, that depends on the couple. I mean, there's a million ways this could go. If a couple is communicating well and they have open communication, they can be vulnerable and they can talk about these difficult things, then they have a really good foundation for success. It's if the couple gets farther away from being honest and being able to be transparent and vulnerable once those things happen. And then if other things crop up like anger and resentment, then definitely a conversation with a professional is a good idea. But your original question is, what do you do? Well, Dave, we've all been here. We do the best we can. And I mean, that was one of the things I was thinking about as we talk today. It's not like we're bashing parents. I mean, all parents did the best they possibly could in all of those situations. I
Yeah.
believe most did. So, really, as parents today, you're doing the best you can, but sometimes conversations can just help to make that go a little better for everyone's sake, not just the children's.
I often think too that kids have a sixth sense. They pick up on parents so clearly. I mean, they're
Mhm.
with them 24/7 really when
Mhm.
they're born. They understand more than as parents we give them credit for. And I think that kind of can sometimes that can be tough on a kid if they're growing up knowing, right?
Mhm.
And no one's dealing with it and they're trying to
Mhm.
deal with it. And you see a
Mhm.
lot of kids too that I've seen over the years where it's what we talked about earlier, they're trying to lead the family. That's not fair to the kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
They got to be able to have their own life as well.
Yeah, that kind of parenting is called enmeshed parenting, where one or more of the children are taking a role inside the family, maybe caring for other siblings, cooking, laundry. Lots of clients, as I meet with them, say, I've been caring for my genetic family since I was 12. And now I'm caring for my family as an adult and or for aging parents. So there's a multitude of the way this conversation can happen. And that's where, if you feel there's a challenge or someone's having a challenge and it might be rooted in any of these topics, just reach out, start the conversation.
Excellent show today, Larry. How do people get a hold of you?
Phone is best. So 226-934-7425 or Lori at purposefullyunplugged.com.
Perfect. I think we're probably going to have this conversation again next month a little bit, because there's like other components of it that I think we could explore, like the word truth. And I think you and I need to, if you don't mind, I'd like to go down this road a little further, because I think we can get a little deeper on this subject. And I think maybe we can, I hope the people that watch our videos can relate to it, and maybe they can reach out and help somebody. So that's the important part. Thanks for doing this today, Laura.
Excellent. Have a good day.